a capacity for kindness. So, close your eyes. Take a few moments to breathe in and breathe out. But I would say on a deeper level, it's more like when we say work on yourself. That involves all kinds of like things about moving your life forward. And they struggle with
motivation in these things.
It's because when I don't think I'm worth it, I'm not worth fixing.
When you develop empathy and compassion for other people, there's going to be room for someone else in the relationship. And then this in turn is going to reduce the feeling of being an object. Now two people can connect. And now it's not about getting your needs met and starvation. It's about two human beings forming a relationship.
wishing for the object of your metta, that these things happen to them. So you'll repeat this thought. May this person be happy. May this person be free. And may this person be at peace.
Alrighty, chat, let's get started. Welcome to another Healthy Gamer GG stream. My name is Dr. Alok Kanoja. Just a reminder that although I am a doctor, nothing we discuss on stream is intended to be taken as medical advice. Everything is for educational and entertainment purposes only. If y'all have a medical concern or question, please go see a licensed professional. So, hello, chat. It has been a little while since we have done a general live stream. It is awesome to be back. I had a slightly restful vacation, or very restful vacation. I was working a ton, and it's really nice to be back. Today, we are going to be looking at a couple of posts about being tired of working, ADHD, and all this kind of stuff. But before we get started with that, as some of y'all may have seen, I was recently reprimanded by the Medical Board of Massachusetts, and I think it's really important to kind of talk about this. So the first thing to understand is that this is like really, really important. We've been cooperating with a board investigation that started about 2 years ago. It's finally concluded, and I think that this is like a very healthy and fair way to do things. So I know a lot of people like the work that we do, and they're like, oh my God, like this is so unfair. No, this is exactly how things are supposed to happen. So about 5 years ago, I saw a problem with mental health. I saw a degree of AOE damage that was being done, where as a clinician working in an office, I realized that like there is no way, like the number of people who need help, we would need an army of clinicians that we don't have to try to fix this problem. The extent to which people are suffering and the extent that the mental health crisis that we were facing required some kind of additional innovation, or something needed to be done differently. So I started streaming. And when I started streaming, I did everything that I could to make sure that this was okay. And then what happened is someone filed a complaint in 2022, and this is exactly why medical boards exist. Right? So medical boards exist because occasionally you'll have a doctor who tries to do something a little bit different. And is this okay, or is this not okay? So over 2 years, we've been investigated by the medical board, and we've been reprimanded, but it's also important to understand what the reprimand is for, what it means, and also what it does not mean. So the reprimand is for undermining the public's faith in the profession. So in the board complaint, and what many people thought was that I was doing something wrong. So this includes everything from being negligent or in some way responsible for rectal suicide, that I was streaming live therapy, that I was conducting the practice of medicine on the internet with patients. So this is really important to understand. The board found that none of those things were true. So what this practically means is that there is a reprimand for undermining the public's faith, but also that, you know, boards have a lot of power, right? So they can do everything from fine me, they can put me on probation, they can recommend ethical training, they can revoke my license, they can suspend my license, they can do all kinds of more practical consequences. But they elected to do none of those things because they found no cause to do any of those things. The other thing that the board can do is determine that what we are doing on the internet is the practice of medicine and therefore requires all these other things. They did not find that that was true as well. So we've been cooperating with the board for the last 2 years. I actually think it has been an eye-opening, humbling, fair, and excellent process. This is why medical boards exist. Because when there is a problem, when I show up and say, hey, I'm here to help, is what I am doing harmful in some way, helpful in some way? Where is the line? I personally feel relieved that the board has gone through everything that we've done with a fine-tuned tooth comb. And they have placed no restrictions on my license, no probation, nothing like that. And furthermore, and more importantly, no restrictions on the work that we do here. So they could have said, hey, you shouldn't do interviews anymore. That's therapy. No more streaming, no more content creation. This is not allowed. This is the practice of medicine. They did not find that any of those things were actually applicable. So I'm still allowed to interview people. I'm still allowed to stream. I can make mental health content on the internet, and I can see patients without restriction. So that feels really good to me. Now, a lot of people may be surprised by those findings because they're like, oh my God, like this is terrible, or what we do is terrible. And I think this is where it's like really important to understand that when we started streaming, we've had a continuous process of improvement because we take this seriously, right? So when I started streaming, didn't have much of an idea of what I was doing. And then every month that goes by, every couple months that go by, we improve our process. So we have a rigorous process of onboarding, boundary setting. We have oversight from a scientific advisory board. We've consulted with the American Medical Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and we will continue to improve our process. I think because our process is so rigorous, this is why the board had no recommendations on what we should do differently and no restrictions on what we already do. So we take this really seriously, and it is absolutely relieving to have someone go through all of the information and basically say there's nothing better that you can be doing right now. We have no recommendations. So this is awesome, right? And furthermore, no restrictions. The other thing that sometimes surprises people is that, a lot of people thought that I was negligent with Recful and all this kind of stuff. And this is where the board actually outlines this very clearly, that I operated within standard guidelines. There's no evidence of negligence or malpractice or anything like that. Now, this may surprise people because they're like, oh my God, what I did was so bad. But I'm going to say this, I've said it before, but I'll kind of say it again. So one of the challenges of this situation is that because someone has a right to privacy, I cannot share everything that I know about the situation, right? So people made allegations, and in order to defend myself, I have to violate someone's privacy. And I'm not going to do that. I'll never do that. The good news, the relieving thing for me is that with the medical board, the right to privacy, because they are a medical board, they reviewed a lot of records, things like that, right? They can look at patient information and they are allowed to make a determination after they've looked through all of the information. And I don't even blame people for thinking negatively about me, right? Because you guys didn't have all the information and you can't ever get all the information. I can't give you the information. It's just not possible. And that's okay, right? So it's part of what being a content creator is. So I think this is a really important, healthy process. This is what oversight looks like, right? This is what we need to be safe, is for someone to go through. It's totally fine to complain, and then the board goes through everything and they make a determination. I think it's been an incredibly fair process. I'm personally relieved, and I'm actually really happy that I continue to do everything that I've been doing, right? No restrictions on my license or content creation. So I showed up here 5 years ago to help, and I will continue to do so in the same ways that I have been. I will also continue, and we as an organization, because this is the other thing to understand, is that this goes way beyond me, right? We have a scientific advisory board. We have, even an ethicist on the scientific advisory board. We have a content team. We have an onboarding team. We have a research team. We have a compliance team, right, to make sure that everything that we're doing is in compliance with all the laws and regulations. And once again, no findings of a lack of compliance with anything that we do, right? So that's really important to understand. And we will continue to improve. So just because the board did not find any faults with our process does not mean that we are not listening to your feedback, does not mean that we are not listening to your criticism, does not mean that we are doing a perfect job and that we can't do better. So overall, this has been honestly, it's been eye-opening, humbling, but I think it's a very healthy thing. This is the way that things work in the world, right? When you try to do something new, occasionally we need a third party that is objective, that is going to look at everything that you do and determine what you are doing right and what you are doing wrong. I'm actually incredibly grateful to the board. I know some people have been like, oh my God, that they're doing their job, right? It's their job to make sure that I'm not doing something out of line or whatever. And then they take my license away if I am. That's what they're supposed to do. And so I'm just really grateful to everyone who's been helpful to us, everyone who's given us feedback on what we could be doing better, everyone who's helped us create the processes that keep people safe in the work that we do. I'm grateful to everyone for all that kind of stuff, right? I'm even grateful to the American Medical Association and American Psychiatric Association for weighing in what way they could in our processes for our attorneys and everyone else. And I'm grateful to y'all for allowing us to do this work, right? So we showed up 5 years ago to help, and I think we've done some help in that time, and we'll continue to do so. And I think that's the most important thing, is that we don't need to change actually like a single thing about our process. Everything that we've been doing, it's not perfect by any means, but the board made no recommendations on restrictions to practice or any of the content or interviews that we do. So I'm sure that this isn't the end of it. I think that we have like posts to cover today. So I think it's important to kind of honor those. And at the same time, like this is, I think it's important, like we got to address this in some way. So I'm really grateful to everyone for allowing me to do this work, the medical board included, y'all included, right? I don't get to do this work unless the rest of the world decides that it's okay. I love that on a Friday in the middle of the day, my job is to talk to the internet about feeling tired and ADHD and, being below average IQ and how do you function in the world. Like it's an absolute privilege to do this work. It is absolutely important to do this work. Because I still think that like what is happening right now is insufficient to, the systems in place are insufficient to support our mental health. And we see piles and piles and piles of evidence to that effect, right? Suicide rates are on the rise, depression is on the rise, anxiety is on the rise, technology addiction is on the rise, loneliness is on the rise, touch starvation is on the rise. Right? Thankfully, we have a lot of other institutions that are aware of these problems and trying to do something about them. The Office of the U.S. Surgeon General, the World Health Organization, the United Nations. A lot of people are trying to do something about this. And this is the small slice that I have chosen to try to help this problem. I hope to continue to do so. I feel privileged that I will continue to be able to do this work essentially in the same way that we have been. I'm not saying that, this is like I will have a license to do this for the next 30 years. Like we're going to continue to make process improvements, right? You can always do better. And that's like part of what we do here at HG is like continual process improvement. It's part of the reason that our content does well. It's part of the reason that our coaching program does well. And by the way, the board looked at all that stuff too. So I'm really grateful for this opportunity. We're really grateful to y'all for being here, allowing us to do this work. We're grateful to y'all for posting on the subreddit about the challenges that you face, asking questions, posting memes, all this other stuff. Like we're grateful for all of it. All right. And 5 years ago, I showed up on the internet to try to help this problem. And thankfully, after the conclusion of this board process, I will continue to do so in roughly the same manner. Right. And I think that's really the important takeaway for me is that I don't have to stop, right? They're saying what I'm doing is okay. Yeah. So let's see. Let me think about, okay. Okay. So the first thing we're going to look at, hold on a second. Let me see if I can, hold on, chat. Let's mute this for a second. Let me see. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. So, yeah. Okay. So, let's get started. Okay. And I'm sure that this will continue to be a topic of discussion, which is fine, right? Like, so that's healthy. Okay. So I saw this. This is actually kind of disturbing, chat. Dr. K is Ariana Grande's crush. So like someone's posted this on her subreddit. And I was like, this is actually like, this is kind of creepy, dude. Like, this is creepy. Like, if I didn't know better, I would think I was living in the Matrix. But I don't even know how to interpret this. I don't know how to understand this. I don't know I've worked with a fair number of musical artists, actors, actresses. I have no comment on this. It kind of honestly, like, it kind of creeped me out a little bit that my face is in a music video. Who knows? Like, I don't know. What do y'all think about this? Like, how should I interpret this? This is a vampire from Twilight. It's Dorian Gray. I don't know, dude. I don't know. Okay. Anyway, this is why, like, when I say it's a privilege to be able to do this work, like, I think it's great that there's a meme shit post or fan art about, like, I don't know what to do or say or how to react, but like, how cool is life when you wake up one day and there's something that's kind of like creepy and arguably flattering? Like, I don't know if I should be flattered or creeped out. I don't know. But I'll tell you one thing, it's not another Friday. Okay, so enough of the memes. Let's get started. Okay, so I just want to chill for the rest of my life. I don't want to fucking work and conform to societal standards. Life is bullshit. I'm just so tired. So this is something that we are seeing more and more of. That, this generation of people, like, we're talking about millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, is sort of experiencing this life where, like, they just want to chill. Like, they're tired of the humdrum. They're tired of work. They're tired of conforming to social standards. They're just tired. Exhaustion is actually like the primary experience. Now, when people feel this way, what happens is oftentimes the older generations, or even our own generation, boomers or other millennials, will say, like, oh, you're a loser for being tired. This is what life is. You got to grind. You got to hustle. And then the older generation will say, like, oh, like, young kids nowadays, they don't have a work ethic. They don't have a this. They don't have a that. So one of the things that I see a lot is when people are exhausted of life, the most common thing that we do is blame them for it. Right? We say that, oh, if you're exhausted in your life, like, this is your fault. If you worked harder, things would be better. And so the challenge that, the hardest thing about the job that I do is actually in pointing out that it isn't your fault, but it is your responsibility. Is this conundrum between, I understand why people are so exhausted. Let's just talk about that for a second. So the first thing is that jobs have changed. So jobs have been optimized for different things. They haven't been optimized for, well-being of the people who are working them, right? So we have these, like, careers where, and I think, like, residency, like medical residency is a really good example of this, where, like, we accept a lot of abuse in the medical resident community because the abuse is temporary. So I've heard horror stories. I ran a program where we did, like, stress management and resilience training for about 600 residents. And I heard horror stories about abusive attendings. And what everyone kind of says is, like, suck it up because it's only a couple of years and then you'll leave and then you'll make hundreds of thousands of dollars and it'll be worth it. And so somewhere along the way, I see this also in banking where it's like we have this saying that says shit rolls downhill. So when you're at the bottom of the hill, you're getting the most shit. And then as you move up the hill, you get to roll the shit down to the peons. I had to go through a crappy phase so that you can go through a crappy phase too. I had to do it. I had to be on the receiving end, so it's okay for me to be on the giving end. We feel exhausted by work because work is not fulfilling. Work is not designed to be fulfilling. And then we also have societal expectations. And this is what's so exhausting about societal expectations. See, we've had societal expectations since the dawn of humanity. I'm pretty sure. I mean, I wasn't there. But the challenge right now is that everyone has societal expectations that are different, and you fall short of all of them. Right? I see this a lot, for example, in dating. So it's like, am I supposed to ask someone out or am I not supposed to ask someone out? Am I being creepy if I ask someone out? Am I violating someone's space? Am I creating a lack of safety? But then on the flip side, other people are like, okay, like, no, you're supposed to be the initiator, right? I'm sort of thinking about men. And women have it no better either. It's like, okay, should I have sex early or not have sex earlier? I don't know. Like, is this person being respectful or are they not being respectful? I don't know what to expect. For women, especially things like kids and career. Am I supposed to have a job? Am I not supposed to have a job? Am I supposed to have kids? Am I not supposed to have kids? And the problem with society right now is that everyone has strong societal expectations that are different, and you can't make everyone happy. So if you're a woman who decides to have a career instead of kids, some people will be like, yay, good job. And other people will be like, when are you having your kids? When are your kids? Hey, when are we getting grandkids? Right? And we have on the flip side, we have men who are like, okay, like men are supposed to express their emotions. It's okay to feel your emotions. It's okay to express your emotions, except for anger. Because if you're an angry man, you're a threat and you're a danger. And women have it no better with anger either, because women are supposed to be docile. They're supposed to be kind. They're supposed to be polite. They're supposed to be empathic. And if you're a woman in the workplace who gets angry, you're a bitch. You're evil. Oh my God, we have a specific term for an angry woman. Bitch. Right? What we don't have a term for an angry man. So I don't think one gender has it better than the other. I think the key takeaway here is that society expects so much of us. You should grind, you should work hard. But by the way, you should also be happy and meditate. You should have a work-life balance, but you should work twice as hard. Right? Like this is the problem, is everyone expects so much from us. You should be fat, you should be thin. Oh yeah, we should have body positivity, but we should also all get in shape. Right? Like, how are you supposed to win this game? It's impossible to win. And people are tired. So if you look at the research on burnout, one of the key factors of burnout, I want to say number one cause, but probably not one of the top three, statistically, is not working hard. See, this is the big mistake that the boomers make. They look at our generation and they say, y'all aren't working hard. It's a problem of work ethic. That's incorrect. This generation is actually the hardest working, I think, statistically. Right? We work way more hours than people used to. The cause of burnout and the cause of exhaustion is working futilely. So when you work really hard and you have nothing to show with it, this is when you get tired. So the problem with living up to expectations, society's expectations, is that you are actually doing a good job of living up to half of society's expectations. You're 100% satisfying this group of people, but this other group of people is still unhappy with you. And so then what do? We want to just check out. I'm done. I just want to chill. I don't want to do the rat race anymore. And people are mentally checking out all over the world. In the US, we call them NEETs, not in education, employment, and training. In parts of South America or Spain, they're called NINIs. Ni trabajo, ni estudiar. In China, it's called laying flat. Right? We're mentally checking out of this. So if you're someone who's exhausted by life, what do you do? What's the solution here? So the solution is actually quite simple, but it's very hard. And that's that you can't live for the sake of a job, and you can't live for the sake of making society happy. It'll never work. You can never make society happy. Because there's a basic issue with human beings, which is that the more that you do for human beings, the more they will want. See, most human beings, if I help you with your laundry once, you will want me to help you with your laundry again, and then you will want me to help you with your laundry a third time, and then you will start to expect me to help you with your laundry. And then if I don't do you a favor, not only is there a complete absence of gratitude, there develops a sense of entitlement. And along with that, if you stop doing me the favor, then I get mad at you. Hey, I need you to work on this rush project. It needs to be done at the end of the weekend. And then once you do it once, they expect you to do it again. They expect you to do it a third time. Right? Not everyone is like this, thankfully. Good people are out there. So what do we do about this? So there's one fundamental problem that we have, which is that at some point we stopped listening to ourselves. And we started paying more attention to the external world. And why is this happening? So if you look at the human being today, there's a couple of really interesting scientific and psychological changes that are happening. And this is more of a yogic perspective now, okay? There's science to it as well. We'll talk about that. The first is that if you look at where your attention goes to the outside. So where am I getting information about what I should do in this world? So most of the information that we're getting is from the outside, because I'm watching these TikToks, I'm listening to some random guy on the internet talking about how I should live my life. And this very inspiring music. Yeah, and that's why you gotta work hard, you gotta grind. Right? Or you listen to stuff that really emotionally resonates with me. Yeah, all women are this, or all men are this, and that makes you feel good. Right? And you keep on scrolling, you're like, yeah, subscribe. Like, tell me more about how women are bad or men are bad. So we go on looking at, like, feeding ourselves this diet of literally manufactured bullshit. I guess not literally, metaphorically. Right? These short form content pieces and things like that. And like, this is the way the world is. Right? This is why people say, go out and touch grass. And so our attention is outside of us. And this is something that's very important to understand. If you look at the way that the human being evolved, the human brain evolved, our attention was within us for like half the day. So for the majority of human history, we've been doing like rote tasks. So we would go out foraging, we'd go out hunting, and then we'd have to walk back for 2.5 hours. And during the walk back, we've got no headphones. We've got no podcasts to listen to. We would have some degree of conversation, but like, what are you talking about for like 2.5 hours on a one-way trip every single day? You can't, there's not enough to say. So what a lot of human beings would do is pay attention to themselves. And fundamentally what has happened in our society today is we've gotten disconnected from our own internal compass. Because literally our mind and our attention is outside of us for the majority of the day. See, I used to have this trap of being efficient. And being efficient is one of the worst things that you can do. So when I was in med school, I was like, oh my God, I got to be efficient. I would wake up in the morning and I would start putting on some podcast. While I did some exercise, while I was in the shower, while I was cooking breakfast, I was listening to something. And then on the way to the train, I would be listening to a lecture. On the train, I'm reading a textbook. When I get off the train, headphones back in, listening to a lecture for the 12-minute walk to the school. Then I go sit down in my lecture hall, I open my notes, I start reading. I am in class all day, I go to whatever, like my study sessions or whatever, and then it's headphones back in, being efficient. Listening to nonfiction, learning languages, I'm always efficient. No time for boredom, no time for idleness, no wasted time. And so what I noticed is that over time, right, so thankfully I had the opportunity to study for a few years in India, I started to notice, hey, well, hold on a second, this is weird. I'm losing sight of myself. I feel disconnected from myself because I'm not spending time with me. I got confused. My grades even weren't that good. And then I abandoned all of that. I started paying attention to myself. I started studying fewer hours a day and my grades went up. See, the basic problem with finding answers about you from outside of you is no one knows you. No one has the degree of information about your internal environment that you have. No one understands your thoughts, your emotions, your drivers, your motivations as well as you do. And so then what happens is we have people who offer solutions like myself. Oh, do this. This will help you. Right? But my solution is never going to map 100% onto you. Therefore, it is going to be inefficient. As you consume more and more information about productivity and habit formation and this and that, all that stuff is good. I'm not saying it's bad, but I'm saying that that is insufficient to build a life where you feel joy, where you have a lot of energy, and you feel good about what's going on. You're progressing. It's not going to work. Now, this problem has gotten way worse over the last 10 years because a second thing has started to happen. And that is that the uniform effect of all of this technology is emotional numbness, internal numbness. We shut down our amygdala and our hippocampus every time we doom scroll, every time we play a video game, if we watch pornography, even if you do something like watch a live stream. All of this stuff will shut down your internal signals. So not only are we externalizing our attention, when we externalize our attention, we are actually numbing ourselves. And when we numb ourselves, we lose sight of ourselves. And when we have a void within because we don't know what we want, right? And I hear this all the time when I'm like working with people like in my office. I'm like, well, what do you want? And they're like, I don't know what I want. Like, that's the problem. I don't have any motivation. Like, this seems like a good idea. I'm kind of curious about this. This seems cool. So even if you listen to people's language, what you find is it's very externally oriented. It's not, I care about this, I want to build this, one day I want this. Sometimes you'll have some degree of fantasy, but it's not internal. It's like, oh, this seems like a good idea. I think I would be a good fit for this profession. Oh, making video games like would be fun. So it's not like information about what I actually know about myself. It is a hypothesis about the external world. And the external world, by the way, loves this. So the external world loves when there's a void within you and you don't know what you want. And this is where we get to the crux of societal expectations, because if you don't know what you want, if you don't know how to develop confidence in your life, then the world can tell you, hey, buddy, you lack confidence, you don't like the way that you look, buy this thing. It'll help. And so if you really look at like what happens to people is they're pulled in 1,000 different directions, right? Today I'm told, oh, I should have work-life balance. Tomorrow I'm told I should hustle more. Today I'm told I should have kids and that I can do it all. And you can be a boss babe. You can have kids and a career. And then you're also told, oh, like you shouldn't have kids and antinatalism and this and that. Like everything's crazy all the time. And so what ends up happening to us? We get pulled in this direction, we get pulled in this direction, we get pulled in this direction. We have no anchor. We are literally pulled away from here, away from here, away from here. Where is our anchor? Our anchor should be here, from within us. And the science behind this is beautiful. So when someone who is addicted to a substance decides in here, hey, I'm done with this shit, they're able to gain sobriety. The majority of people who become sober do so without any medical help. And if you talk to these people, what they'll say is they'll say, one day I woke up and I realized enough was enough. This is the strength that we're lacking. Right? Because when you have an internal compass, in my case, I had an internal drive. I was going to be a doctor, hopefully. And so I applied to medical school, 40 rejections in year 1. Applied year 2, 40 more rejections. 80 rejections. Year 3, 39 rejections, 1 acceptance. If I was relying on society, and by the way, society tried to tell me to quit. Right? People told me, bro, you've applied for 2 years, 80 medical schools. You've gotten 2 interviews, not a single acceptance. You should quit. You should do something else. Go to the Caribbean, get a PhD, do something else. So society will give you reasons to quit. Society, not just reasons to quit, reasons to do something else, right? Oh, do this thing, do this thing, do this thing, be this way. Color your hair this way, buy this thing. So the internal fortitude to defy society's expectations comes from understanding yourself. See, this is another subtlety that I think is very easy to miss. I don't want to work and conform to society's standards. There's a subtlety here which we need to talk about, which is that when you don't conform to society's standards, how do you feel? It hurts. It doesn't feel good to conform to society's standards. You don't like it. And so then what do? You conform to society's standards, right? So I was working with a patient once who had a sibling who was like not the golden child, well, the older sibling. And then older sibling had a pretty tragic accident. And so the parents, understandably, started caring for that sibling quite a bit. But then something weird, something toxic started to happen. Everything was about this sibling. Right? And as this sibling, poor person, could not finish university, could not get a job, could not drive, could not participate in relationships, right? Was really paralyzed, literally. So, of course, what do the parents do? The parents start caring for this person. And then something toxic started to happen, which is that as the younger siblings started to achieve, oh, we can't really celebrate that because it's going to make your sibling feel bad. When you graduate from college, we're not going to hold a party because, it'll be hard on your brother. Your brother won't be able to handle it, right? We're not going to, no, I'm glad that you got a new car, but we're not going to advertise it. It's going to be tough on your brother. Your brother's been through so much. And so all these societal expectations, right? Familial expectations. Hey, you shouldn't be this way. Don't advertise. And the real tragedy of living up to societal expectations is that doesn't make you happy. See, when you live up to societal expectations, all you feel is relief. You don't feel pride. Pride comes from within. So this is the problem of societal expectations. If you don't live up to them, you feel disappointed in yourself. You feel bad. And even if you do live up to them, all you feel is relief. You're never getting your head above water, right? We're just getting right to the surface. It's a lose-lose situation. And when we play this lose-lose game, no wonder we're tired. And if you look at people who are content at life, there's absolutely studies that show that, there's a certain amount of income that correlates with a positive quality of life. My personal read on that is that there's a certain amount of very objective stress which resources can get rid of. Security can be countered by resources, but resources cannot create fulfillment. Lack of security. Right? So resources give you a certain amount of security, and that is the foundation for happiness. So it's very hard. Even when I was in India many years ago, people would say you can't meditate on an empty stomach. And if you kind of think about it, see, people think that monks have given up life and that their life is very difficult because they've given up all of their material desires. Hard to be a monk, right? No, the exact opposite. The most secure and safe people on the planet are monks. They have the easiest lives. People say, oh my God, it's so hard. You can't watch video games, or you can't play video games, you can't watch TV, you can't have sex. Isn't it hard to give up life? No, the monks have the easiest life on the planet. I want you to understand why. Let's think about this. I stayed in an ashram. I woke up, meditated for a while. I walk into the dining hall and someone gives me food. I don't pay for it. I walk in at lunchtime, someone gives me food. I don't pay for it. I walk in at dinner time, someone gives me food. I don't pay for it. I go to my dormitory at night. I have somewhere to sleep. I don't pay for it. Think about this. Monks have utter security. Their meals are paid for. Their clothes are paid for. Usually they even have cell phones that are paid for. They live on the charity of others. And this is the crazy thing. They're the biggest mooches on the planet, and we respect them for it. Like, what the fuck? Oh, you're a monk. Oh. Tell me. Yes, take money. Yes. Oh, you're so great. Fucking hobos living on our dime that we respect. Right? It's crazy. So you really can't meditate on an empty stomach, and the monks have figured this out. And thankfully, as a society, we've been kind enough to support monks. I'm not saying don't support monks. I think it's good. It's healthy. Right? Because the problem is that you don't get to eat some omakase or some Michelin star restaurant. So you do have to give up quite a lot. But if you really look at security, they are very secure. They don't have to worry about where they're going to be living 10 years from now. They don't have to worry about how to put food on the table for the next decade. People give them free stuff like medical care and It's great. So the problem with life right now is that like we're disconnected from ourselves. We're trying to live up to these societal expectations. Even if you work really hard, you're not working for yourself. You're working to make someone else happy at work or at home or societal expectations. And so like it's never going to work. And the solution is, I think, honestly, multifactorial. So there's a lot of stuff that we in society need to do. Right? So it's not just on you. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges of trying to help individuals. Is when I work with patients, we talk about, oh, like, like you can do this and you can do this. And like, if you're having trouble with dating, like we can work on your confidence. But the truth of the matter is that as a psychiatrist, like I can't change the world that my patients live in. And if you really look at the data, the most influential thing for your mental health is the world that you live in. It is nothing about what you do. So there are some really profound studies on adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. And what we find is that the crappier your childhood is, the more times you move, the more times your parents get divorced, the more times you get abused, the shittier your mental health is going to be, and the shittier your life will be. Your circumstances create so much power in your life. In the East, we call this karma, and karma cannot be escaped. This is the truth of it. We need societal change. That's why I started streaming in the first place, because I found it to be insufficient to help people one at a time. We need to change the whole society. Now, the challenge is that if we need to change society, are you screwed? And that's where, thankfully, the answer is no. So this is another mistake that I think a lot of people make, is that they say, okay, society sucks. Fair enough, right? I don't disagree, and life is hard. And yet, the real tragedy of the situation is that, like, who's going to take responsible for fixing the society that you live in? I'm going to do some tiny part. I encourage y'all one day to do some tiny part. We'll talk about that later. But the real challenge, the real fucking scam of being alive in the world today is that you're fighting an uphill battle. That you have to carve out happiness, success, motivation. You have to carve it out of the society that we live in. It's not going to give it to you. In fact, it's designed to take it away from you. And this is the real tragedy, right? So when I work with a patient, I'm thinking about one patient in particular who has bipolar disorder. And we were talking about how challenging it is to live with bipolar disorder. They were like, this is not fair. Like, why am I like this? I do so well for about 18 months, and then I have this manic episode. I spend $80,000, dig through all of my savings, buy all this stupid shit, start gambling, ruin my relationships, fuck up my job. This isn't fair. And what am I supposed to say to that as a psychiatrist? Right? I can't say, there are a lot of people out there who are kind of anti-psychiatry and like, oh yeah, like it's all excuses that people make and like, these are just pussies. I don't subscribe to that. I don't think it's fair. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. You're the one who has to live with it. Right? This is a reality of your life. And people aren't understanding about mental health. They're not compassionate about mental health. That's a reality of the world that we live in. Thankfully, y'all are starting to change that. And so what we need to do is take responsibility for whatever we can do. And this is the crazy thing. The crazy thing is that when I see people do this, it is very effective. You'd be amazed. I think you will be amazed. Because I've seen people who are lost and behind and hate society, and I've seen them rise to a place of happiness and success. And I see it consistently. All you really need to do is tap into yourself. Right? Start to connect with this. And I think this is our first answer, which is going to be somewhat insufficient because this is a whole process. In Dr. K's Guide to Trauma, we talk about this process of how you get disconnected from yourself. Literally what happens in trauma is we form some degree of emotional numbness. We have this process called hemispheric lateralization, which results in things like literally dissociation and depersonalization. There's a process to reconnect with yourself. And you must reconnect with yourself. You must listen to yourself. This is critical. And as you listen to yourself, what makes this hard? What makes this hard is because the shit in there is not good. There's this old story from Hindu mythology where somewhere along the way there were a group of devas, which are like angels, and asuras, which are like demons. So back before there were humans, there were the devas and the asuras, and these people are in conflict. And somewhere along the way, someone told them, hey, at the bottom of the ocean is ambrosia. That will, if you drink it, you will have immortality. And so the devas and asuras decide to have a truce, and they're like, okay, we got to get this stuff from the bottom of the ocean. How are you going to get it from the bottom of the ocean? They don't have submarines. So what they start to do is churn the ocean. Like, I have a good idea. How do you bring something from the bottom to the top? You churn it. Right? Let's create some drama. So they churn the ocean, but before the ambrosia comes up, poison floats to the surface. And they're like, oh crap, now there's poison at the top. Someone has to deal with the poison. And so it ends up that Shiva takes the poison and he stores it in his throat. He does this weird thing where he just holds it in his throat. And it's also like the symbol of a powerful yogic practice called a throat lock. And then once the poison is removed, then comes the ambrosia. And I think this is a beautiful analogy for what I see as a therapist. Before you get to the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, it's not a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's a shit bow. It's a lot of shit with a pot of gold at the end. See, a pot of gold doesn't exist at the end of the rainbow. It's not beautiful, 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 beautiful reward. It's shit, 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 shit reward. In therapy, what we do is we dig in the process of discovering confidence, discovering motivation, discovering passion. We have to work through a lot of crap. I don't know why it is this way. But the negativity is on the surface and the goodness is underneath. Right? We have this also in the hero's journey where we have to go through trials and tribulations to attain success at the end. And this is the basic problem that we have is anytime people start to do introspective work, anytime you stop numbing yourself, what do you experience? Negativity, lack of confidence, shame, fear. All of these negative things come up, which you suppress through your technological usage. And so what we need is perseverance with introspection. You got to keep going, right? And this is why, thankfully, we have professionals, we have tools. Psychotherapists are fantastic at this. Sometimes coaches do this work, but coaches are more about accomplishing a particular thing. And then if there is an internal barrier, overcoming that barrier for the sake of accomplishment. Whereas a therapist, this is my simplistic understanding. A therapist is more interested in not necessarily accomplishing a particular goal. It doesn't mean that they can't be goal focused, but generally speaking, we're interested in healing, not accomplishing. And so a coach will be more about, okay, if we have to heal this in order to accomplish it, let's do it. But a therapist will be focused more on healing, right? Which is why they're medical professionals, mental health professionals. The goal is healing, health, not outcomes. Which is a whole tragedy in the therapy profession to begin with. But anyway, conversation for a different day. So it's going to be hard. Right? And this is what's the really challenging thing is we're so externally and outcome focused that we think, what amount of this work will lead me to health and happiness and success? And the answer is, I don't know. And this is the big paradox. And this is exactly the flip that the switch that I see flips is that sometimes when we start working on this stuff, it gets hard, and then we power through. We don't give up because we say to ourselves, this is important enough. I'm doing this for myself. This doesn't help anyone but me. It's not to get a promotion. It's not to make someone happy. I'm doing it for me. I'm tolerating this pain and suffering for me. And the tragedy of the world is you can tolerate as much pain and suffering as you want for other people, but they will never give you the gratitude that is commensurate for what you've sacrificed. Tell me I'm wrong. I would love to believe I'm wrong. No one will appreciate you as much as you deserve. If you guys disagree, prove me wrong. This has been my experience. So in order for you to be worth it, you have to be worth it for yourself. I'm making this sacrifice for me. I'm dealing with this crap for me. I'm going to connect with who I am. And the beautiful thing is once you connect with who you are, there's data on this as well, that once you have an internal drive for something, right? This goes back to the competing interest and overcoming addiction. Once you have a reason in here, this is worth it for me. I have decided what I want. Then the amount of mental fortitude you have is mind-blowing. Literally, metaphorically mind-blowing. So I'll work with people who are addicted to alcohol, and I don't know if y'all understand this, but alcohol withdrawal is lethal, is life-threatening. When you withdraw from alcohol, you have these things called GABA receptors. And when you drink alcohol, the alcohol goes to your GABA receptor and activates the GABA receptor. Now, the GABA receptor tones down the activity of the brain. So it slows everything down, makes it harder for your neurons to trigger an action potential, dulls you out. And then when we drink lots and lots and lots of alcohol, we bombard our GABA receptors, and our GABA receptors start to downregulate. So we're basically disabling the brake in our brain. And the reason that we're still able to function is because we have so much alcohol swimming around that the alcohol is like an artificial brake. So once we remove the alcohol, our brakes no longer work because we were relying on the alcohol to slow down the action potentials and activation of our brain. Which means that when we no longer have a brake on the brain, the neurons start hyperactivating. They bounce back because they used to be suppressed by the alcohol. It's a rebound effect. And this literally causes seizures. But if y'all know medicine, you know that action potentials don't just exist in neurons. They also exist in heart muscle. Electrical conductance is how the heart pumps in unison. There's an electrical signal that goes through our ventricles and causes all of the muscles to contract. And so when we withdraw from alcohol, the heart muscle can also seize. And when the heart muscle seizes, we die. Literally. That's a literal. Alcohol withdrawal can be fatal. Now, this is important to understand. When your body is dying, it will let you know. It will send the most powerful signals that it can to tell you, hey, dumbass, drink. Otherwise, we will die. Your body is very smart. And so the process of overcoming alcohol withdrawal is conquering the most powerful signals that your body will send you. These are signals which have built over millions of years of evolution to preserve life. It doesn't start with straight seizures. It starts with shakes. It starts with agitation. It starts with cravings. It starts with dry mouth. It starts with palpitations. As your body starts the process of dying through seizures, it tries to control it. The neurons want to seize. The heart muscle wants to seize. That's what a palpitation is. It's not beating normally. It's monitoring that, and it sends you signals. Drink, 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 drink. It's getting worse. It's getting worse. I can't handle this. We're going to die. We're going to die. We're going to die. And what is it that allows people to conquer this? It is internal fortitude. It is saying, I'm going to do this, even if it costs me my life. That degree of strength is what's missing. This is why life is hard. This is why we lack motivation. We lack this connection to ourself, We have a void within us that has been created through living up to external expectations and numbing ourselves through technology, not to mention substances like alcohol and marijuana. And in this void, the rest of the world fills it in. There's no fortitude. We're completely disconnected from where our perseverance and strength comes from. And when we connect with that thing, it literally makes a human being so focused and have such a degree of willpower and motivation that they can conquer these signals. Now, thankfully, in the case of alcohol withdrawal, we also have people like medical professionals who will do things like push IV Ativan, which will keep us from dying, and will also calm some of those signals down. What we do in medicine, thankfully, is we titrate people off, right? So we give them the amount of GABA support they need. So we start off with like 10 milligrams a day, and then we go to 8 milligrams a day, and then we go to 6 milligrams, and then 4 milligrams and 2 milligrams, and then we're off. So over 5 or 6 days, it's a rocky thing, but we can give the body time to acclimatize so that alcohol withdrawal is no longer life-threatening. That's the right way to do it. Also feels way better, right? So don't go trying to withdraw from alcohol by yourself. Like it's medically dangerous. I would strongly recommend you go to a medical professional. But these are the issues at play. And we have a society of people who are tired. And why are you tired? Because you have no energy. Where does the energy come from? Energy comes from in here. You can't be externally motivated. I mean, people try to rely on external motivation. You can have some degree of external motivation. But when we're talking about going the distance, the problem with external motivation is it comes from the outside, which means if your environment changes, your motivation changes with it. It's not sustainable. So people will try to craft an environment that creates their motivation. And this is clever, but it's not ideal. See, people who craft their motivation, craft their environment to create motivation, you are still surrendering control to your environment. And if the environment changes, then your motivation will change with it. People who date a partner because they lack confidence in themselves. And this person tells me I'm beautiful. This person tells me I'm wonderful. Therefore, I feel good about myself. It is a short-term solution that propagates the long-term problem. Instead, let the confidence develop from within. Now, why is that hard? Because when I go digging within, what do I find? I find shame. I find a lot of lack of confidence. So if you're someone who's tired of the world, tired of living up to societal expectations, tired of work, and you just want to chill, connect with yourself. That's where chillness comes from. There's a whole different conversation. Maybe we can go into it if y'all want, but what is the nature of chillness? Literally, where does chillness begin and where does it end? Chillness is about contentment in here. Am I chill with 1 beer or 2 beers or 3 beers? See, chillness is an internal experience, and that's where we need to explore. So some people will say, oh my God, I hate working 8 hours. Some people will say, I hate working 12 hours. I'm happy to work 24 hours. I'm chilling. I love being on call. I like working hard on call. I like that time at like 2:30 in the morning when I step outside of the hospital and everything is quiet. Maybe 3:30. I've got my pager with me, so if something happens, I'll get paged and I walk back in. But the whole world is asleep. And I go to the roof of the hospital and I just step outside and I just look out wherever I am. Go to the upper levels of Massachusetts General Hospital and look out over the Charles River while the whole world is asleep. It's a beautiful experience. And then I get paged. So-and-so is constipated. Like, all right. Time to help this person take a shit. If you're a doctor and you've been on call, you know what I'm talking about, right? The 330 pages for constipation. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you're very lucky and you've got a good day team that manages constipation and you don't get paged for it. That's good. You should be paging me for heart attacks and seizures, not constipation. But then I worked with people who had constipation, and constipation can be worse. Okay? Questions? The whole world is not asleep. Yeah, we're not asleep, but you're not visible from the top floor of a hospital. How do you find what you like without trying? You have to try. Who said that there's no trying? How do you connect with yourself? Okay, these are all great questions, all right? How to overcome the need for external validation and belonging. Okay. So a lot of people struggle with being addicted or dependent to external validation or belonging. And I want to ask y'all a simple question. How do I become independent of the charity of others to feed me? How do I no longer become dependent on other people's pantries for food? I have to have my own pantry that's stocked. See, you only need external validation when you are not happy with yourself. External validation is when there is a lack of internal validation. When you are confident in the work that you're doing, when you believe in the work that you're doing, when you are happy with the work that you've done, right? So sometimes I'll get patients who are upset with me. They'll be like, Dr. K, I've been coming to you for 6 months and I'm not cured yet. You're the worst doctor on the planet. You've been scamming me. You've been doing this and like, you should have done this different. You should have done this different. People will come and be very upset with me. And oh my God, like this is my patient. I care about this person. I've been working so hard. It'll tear you apart. Right? And it's important as a doctor. I think this is a big mistake that we make as a profession. We don't listen to those people enough. So we should listen to those people. And I think I try to listen to those people. They may disagree. Right? So I take what they say seriously. Like, because if you're 6 months in and you're not happy, like maybe I'm doing something wrong. There's no question I could have done something better because I'm not perfect. There must be something I could have done better. Tell me what I could have done better. Tell me, please. I'm here to help. But even that approach comes from an internal confidence. Right? The only way to tolerate that kind of thing is for me to feel good in here. See, narcissism involves a dependence upon the opinions of others. This is why narcissists can't tolerate criticism. Because if you tell me that I am a bad person, I don't feel good on the inside, so your opinion determines my reality. Narcissism is about insecurity. It's insecurity at its root. Because if I believed in myself, I don't need your approval. So how do we get independent of external validation? We have to be confident in ourselves. We have to have internal validation. This is why in psychotherapy, when we have someone who has an insecurity, this is oftentimes confuses these people. Because the therapist will say nice things to you. They'll say like, oh, like, it sounds like you worked really hard for that. And then they get really skeptical, right? You're like, you're saying that because you're my therapist. You're trying to be nice. You don't actually believe that. Think about that for a second, right? Have you ever been skeptical of you're like, nah, therapist is just being nice. So hold on a second. We got to unpack this. The first is that why are you skeptical of what the therapist is saying? Right? Because you don't believe it yourself. If I tell you, hey, I think you're pretty, and you're like, are you trying to trick me? Are you going to make fun of me? Am I on camera somewhere? I'm not pretty. I'm not good looking. See, when you believe something about yourself and you get contrary evidence, there's data about this, right? Cognitive bias. We discount contrary information. It's because you don't believe me, then you find the reason. Then the mind is like, they're saying that because they're a therapist. But it doesn't matter whether they're a therapist or not. You disbelieve the statement to begin with. Then your mind goes and looks for logic that allows you to disbelieve it. Because the therapist says, oh, I think you did a good job. You're like, you're just saying that because you're my therapist. But if someone else tells you you did a good job, you do the same thing. Your parents tell you, oh, you're my mom. A random person on the street tells you, oh, hey, I think you did a good job. And you're like, this person may believe it, but what about the other 100 people? Your mind will find ways to disable it. So if you want to get off of external validation, the first thing you need to do is recognize this pattern. What do you do that allows you to ignore the positive signals from life? The second thing to understand about this, and so let me finish about the therapist thing first. So what we're doing in therapy, by the way, is not trying to convince you that you're a good person. That's not our job. What we're trying to do is teach you a way of looking at yourself. We're trying to model behavior about self-confidence. So when I say something to someone in therapy, my goal is for them to be able to say it to themselves in the future. The goal of therapy is for you to leave. See, a lot of people think that, people want to create, therapists want their patients to be there forever because you're milking them for money. I don't really think that's the case. I certainly don't. Most of my colleagues, I wouldn't say do that. There's a shortage of patients. I don't need you to stick around. It's like 6 months wait lists. More patients than the therapists on the planet can ever see. So the goal is to get you to leave. And how do we get you to leave? We train you to think about yourself in a healthier way. Now, then the question becomes, why aren't you thinking about yourself in a healthier way? Because you were taught not to. See, when you were growing up and you were developing your sense of self, someone or something around you taught you that you were a piece of crap, that you don't deserve praise, that you're ugly. They made the core of you to lack confidence. And this is important to understand. This is not the default state. So if you just observe a child who's 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, child has no shame. Child doesn't care about wearing clothes. They don't care if their junk is out there. They don't care if they've got food on their shirt. They don't care if their haircut is good or bad. Children are content at baseline. They have confidence at baseline. That's why they're so stupid. Right? Kids will like, oh, like, I saw this video of like this kid jumping into a sewage hole. Right? And like, why do kids do stupid things? Because they're confident in themselves. They don't realize that they're impervious, that they have, so kids will walk up to strangers, they'll talk to strangers, they'll do all this kind of stuff. There's some amount of stranger anxiety and stuff which is built in. But confidence is the default state. Shame is taught. Right? So when I was growing up, it was literally called, I don't know if you guys are like brown or if this is in other cultures or if this is just my family, shame shim. Oh, your Vivi is hanging out? That is shame shim. Shame shim, shame shim. Shame shame means you should be ashamed of yourself. This is shame. This is shame. We teach shame. We have to teach it. And depending on your upbringing, you were taught a lot of shame. Your confidence was shattered. And then once your confidence becomes shattered, then you require other people to feed it. Right? Now your water pipes are broken, so you need to get water from someone else. Carry buckets of water. And oftentimes when we're growing up, if you really pay attention, this is really sad, but like people do that on purpose. Like subconsciously maybe, but like it's intentional, right? Subconsciously intentional. Because when they can make you feel bad about yourself, they have power over you. And that feels good to them in some way because they feel powerless in their own lives. So the more powerless I feel, the more I need to exert power on the people around me to make myself feel powerful. This is why we have petty tyrants in the bureaucracy. These are people who feel like cogs in a machine. They don't have the ability to exercise whatever they want to in their life. They want to create some kind of policy change. It takes 18 months. These people feel powerless in their life. So what do? They lord it over the poor saps who end up in line in front of them. Always respect petty bureaucrats. Always. Give them as much deference and respect as you can. Because even though they're tiny little cogs in a big machine, they can destroy your life. Be polite to receptionists. Be polite to people who you talk to after you've been on hold for 15 minutes. It's not their fault. Customer service people, teachers, they're not beneath you. These people deserve respect. Give them respect or they will punish you for it. So oftentimes we grow up with a petty tyrant who destroys our confidence. And when they destroy our confidence, then we are dependent on other people. So what we need to do is regain that internal confidence. Really look at the hard parts of yourself. Look at the things that you lack confidence on and do something about them. And by do something about them, let's say that I'll walk y'all through it, okay? So there's take an action, and then this is the really important part. It's not just about the action, because a lot of people will take the action, but they don't do the second step, which is more important. Then what you need to do is watch for and counteract the cognitive habit that comes afterward, the vasana. So I'll give you all an example. Let's say I don't feel good about my body. So then I go to the gym because everyone's like, oh, go to the gym. Okay, I'll go. Going to the gym is only 25% of the battle. It's not even half. Then it's what happens when you go to the gym, what your mind does when you go to the gym, and what your mind does after you go to the gym. It starts making comparisons. Oh, you're so out of shape. Oh, you're so pathetic. And then you leave and you're like, I'm never coming back. That's where the real damage is. So I see this a lot, for example, like with people who are hopeless. Right? Sometimes people will come to my office and they'll be hopeless. Like, I've tried everything. I went to this doctor. I did this. I worked with a dating coach. I got plastic surgery. I did everything. Nothing works. See, we can change as much as we want to in the outside world. But if we don't change the inner response, no amount of external change will be sufficient. And I know this sounds like, oh, like change yourself on the inside. No, let's just be fucking practical for a second, okay? If you have someone who is unhappy in life, no amount of gifts will make them happy. And I bet you money that y'all know this because you've tried it. You've done kindness after kindness after kindness for this person. They're still not happy. They say, oh, I don't like this. I don't get the good food. You give them the good food. Oh, I don't have friends. You invite them somewhere. You try to help them over and over and over again, and nothing seems to work. Let's think about it scientifically. How is this? That's because only half of it is the action. The other half is the internal response, the cognitive response. The yogis discovered this thousands of years ago when they discovered a vasana, a mental habit, a mental reaction that discounts external action. Thousands of years later, Aaron Beck rediscovered it. Right? He said, hold on a second, there is a cognitive bias at play. So for anything that you lack confidence about, take the action. But what the internet fails to tell you is that the action is just half the battle. It is the mental response that you have, and watch yourself and think about this for a second, right? So I went to the gym today and I walk out and how do I feel about myself? Pathetic. This was a mistake. There's the problem. When progress becomes a mistake, you will stay stuck for the rest of your life. Going to the gym is a mistake if you feel unhappy about your body? What the fuck illogic is that? This is why we stay stuck. It is not because of the lack of action. It is because not understanding what our mind does. And so by all means, go see a therapist. By all means, check out what we do on the membership side where we explain these more advanced yogic concepts like vasana. By all means, just pay attention to yourself. By all means, you look at this on your own. You don't need anyone's help. Help helps. Look and ask yourself one question. What is the progress that I make that my mind thinks is a mistake? That wasn't intended to rhyme, but it came out nicely. And this one thing will transform so much of your life. Like, it's crazy, man, how hard we sandbag ourselves. And this, by the way, is why I have faith. This is why I show up here. right? I look at this picture, and I know we've been talking about this for a while. I just want to chill for the rest of my life. I look at this and people are like, oh my God, my life is so hopeless. My life is so hopeless. I get that it is. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. But you're also driving with a flat tire. You'd be amazed. I mean, the reason I believe this stuff is not because I'm Dr. K. I believe this stuff because I've seen it. I believe this stuff because I was a fucking loser who didn't know how the hell to live life. And I learned a couple of these things, and it's been night and day. But then I thought to myself, being trained in epidemiology, like maybe it's a sample size of 1. You can't rely on this stuff, right? Maybe I got lucky, and I certainly did. Then I started teaching it to other people, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. It works consistently. And then I realized one day, I was like, am I really onto something crazy? No. This isn't that transformative. All we're doing is teaching someone how to use the controller. If you're playing a game and you don't know what the buttons do, you don't know how what the damage calculation is, you don't know the effect of armor reduction, you don't understand things like effective HP, you don't understand you've got some fucking Elon Musk Elden Ring build and you're going through life, no hate on Elon Musk. I think his Elden Ring build is great. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like, no wonder you're struggling. And then if you start to learn how this stuff works, if you start to realize, holy crap, my mind is turning progress into a mistake. No wonder life is hard. Like some of the people that I work with are trying to drive a car that's stuck in neutral gear and they're slamming on the gas pedal and they're like, hey, everyone says that the gas pedal moves things forward, but it doesn't seem to work for me. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But that's because we're missing something. So understand yourself. Understand how the controller works. Understand the game of life. Understand the mechanics. And then your life will change. Great questions. Shall we move on? Man, so many good questions. How do I know what I will like when I find it? You pay attention to yourself. Right? And this is it's so crazy that this is a question, but you pay attention to yourself. So this is people will wonder, okay, how do I know what I like? And so this sounds kind of weird, but I learned this lesson from patients that I work with who are homosexual. So I was once working with a patient. And, he was an older gentleman. He was from the South. He was happy to work with me because I, too, was from the South. He wasn't interested in any of this New England woke stuff, right? Dude has been gay his whole life, 60 years. Just doesn't realize it. Or he realizes it, he just doesn't like it. Right? And so when you talk to people like this, and it's kind of like, I'll ask a set of questions. And it's, when you watch pornography, what kind of pornography do you watch? When you fantasize about sexual relationships, what goes through your head? Right? And we know what we know what we like. Our body and our brain tell us. Right? So this person had come because he had some degree of erectile dysfunction. Turns out that his erectile dysfunction is because he's just trying to have sex with people he's not attracted to. Right? They don't have the right parts. And so if you really pay attention to yourself, your body and your brain and your internal experience will tell you. The challenge is that we judge ourselves. This is why it's hard. It sounds so simple. But the problem is, once again, a vasana, a cognitive reaction. So if you don't know what you like in life, if you don't know what you want in life, there are 2 things to do. The first is cut back on your technology use, ideally for an extended period of time. So spend 2 or 3 days off the grid if you can. Go for a weekend camping somewhere. Because those neurological signals of suppression of internal experiences will be it'll be hard. You're playing the game with a handicap. The second thing that you need to do is look at self-judgment. The thing that is the most confusing about understanding yourself is self-judgment, because you have an impulse and you judge it and you swat it down. And since you are actively suppressing it through self-judgment, you'll never discover that you like it. You'll never discover that it matters to you. So I was working with someone else who was once dating someone who was less attractive than they were. Less attractive in a lot of dimensions. So a woman who was dating a man who was not as physically attractive made 15% as much money as the female partner. The lady was my patient. She's like, I don't know what I'm doing with this guy. He's a loser. He's this. He's this. She comes in and she complains about him every week. Like, why don't you break up with him? I don't know. Right? The more that we get to it, the more that we realize that she actually likes him. That's why she stays with him. Some primal part of her, some deeper part of her is like, I like this person. He makes me happy. And I've dated lots of people who are more successful who don't make me happy. He prioritizes me. He cares about me. He makes me laugh. What's the problem? The problem is the self-judgment. The problem is I should be with this kind of person. The problem is the societal conditioning. So if you want to understand what you like, there's a really, really, really good thing that you can do, which is pay attention to your self-judgment. And it doesn't necessarily mean that whatever you judge is something that you like, but that's a point of exploration. And what you will find is some of the things that you love the most are things that you judge yourself harshly for. So I'll give you all a good example. Some people love to dance, but they suck at it. And so they are afraid of dancing. They're like, I have no rhythm. I never grew up learning how to dance. Or I love to sing, but I feel embarrassed. Right? You know you love to sing. You know you want to dance. You know that you want nothing more than to be graceful on the dance floor. You know nothing more than you want to be able to sing freely. But what keeps it? Your self-judgment. You're bad at this. And one of the most tragic things about not understanding what we love is we do not allow ourselves to love what we are bad at. It's a tragedy that society does not allow us to be bad at things. And so we go on discounting what's happening within us over and over and over again. Whatever you judge about yourself, that should be explored. Okay? Now, I really need to get my act together. Because this is just one post and we have got like 30 minutes left. But how do y'all, let's do more posts, right, chat? Let me see if I can do this. Thoughts on ketamine addiction? Okay. Okay, let's move on to posts, okay? Thoughts on ketamine addiction. Do I want to answer that? Okay, let me do this. I'm going to show y'all what the next post is. And then what we are going to do is we are going to do this thing called Ask Chat. This one? No. Okay, I don't know. Yo, y'all need to chill. No. Quiet. Okay. Let me do this real quick. So here's the next post. I want to do this one for sure. Okay. I get a job. I can't stand this anymore. I quit. I need a job to survive. We're going to talk about how to break out of the cycle. But before we do that, what do? Ketamine addiction or cycle of job and quit? All right, let's vote real quick, chat. One of the advantages Okay, so cycle of job and quit is winning pretty heavily. Okay, so no surprise. The team here at HG selected a lot of great posts that we will focus on. Okay? So I love doing Q&A, and I know it's just been a while, but okay. All right, so we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and I'm going to pause this, and I'm going to pay attention to chat. Okay. I know Sugar Danny's saying ketamine. Sorry, Sugar Danny. All right. I get a job. I can't stand this anymore. I quit. I need a job to survive. So this is a cycle that a lot of people go to. Okay? Go through, sorry. And the problem with this cycle is that it's a cycle. And so what happens is that if we look at cycles, the basic problem with cycles is that we go through them over and over and over again. And if we think about why do we go through a cycle over and over and over again, like fundamentally, like what's going on, right? Does that kind of make sense? Like why does this happen? So the reason is because a cycle is driven by particular things. The reason that we end up going through this cycle is because we're actually continuously responding to certain emotional drivers. And if we kind of look at this, okay, here's what's going on, right? So let's take a look at this real quick. So I get a job. I can't stand this anymore. Okay, so what we're going to do is take a look at this. I can't stand this anymore. I quit. I need a job. So for any cycle to continue, it requires an energy input. Okay? So this is like important to understand. Anytime we're making a movement, it requires energy input. And the reason that this cycle is so common is because it actually has the same energetic input. Each of these steps actually increases energy in a particular way. And then once that energy reaches a critical threshold, then that energy drives us to action. And breaking this cycle is actually relatively simple, but it can be very difficult. And what we need to understand is not these steps. We need to understand the arrows. Because what actually propagates the cycle? It's not the steps, it's the arrows. Does that make sense? This is what's moving us from here to here. So think about this for a moment. I get a job. The real money is not that you get a job. It's what happens over here that allows you to not, I can't stand this job anymore. And if you can't stand this job, what results in the quitting? If you quit, what results in the not needing the job? So oftentimes what I find is that when people are in cycles, what they tend to do is they actually miss the important stuff. Right? So I keep on like, I can't find someone. I can't find the right person. I keep on dating the wrong people. And it's like, I'm lonely. I need to date, or I date someone. I date someone. This relationship is unhealthy or doesn't feel right. I break up. Right? We can see these cycles. This happens a lot too. Or I got to get out of the house. I go out of the house. I try to socialize. I feel anxious. So there are a lot of these cycles. And everyone focuses on these steps. But that's not where the money is. The money is right here. Now, the reason for that is because when human beings correctly diagnose a problem, they fix it. If a problem persists, that usually means there is incorrect diagnosis. Same is true for the medical profession. That's how we learn this stuff. If I diagnose you with the wrong thing and I keep treating you, you're going to keep having problems. So if we want to understand what drives us in this cycle of getting a job, can't stand this anymore, quitting, and I need a job, what it is our emotional motivation. We are victims to our emotional motivation, which is why we propagate this cycle. Okay, so let's understand this. So the first thing, let's start with I need a job. So when you need a job, what is going on here? We're desperate. I need a job. Right? You're not selecting a job. It is a move of desperation. And when you're making a move of desperation, so you're so desperate. So like now I'm like, I have some amount of money. The money starts to run out. The desperation starts to rise. And as the desperation reaches a critical threshold, it triggers a motivational action, which is find a job. The panic signals happen. Find a job, find a job, find a job. So I find a job. I go walking down the street. Oh, look, it is a job. So if we look at it, what is it that drives me? What is it that results in a job? It is desperation. So the moment that I have a job, the desperation disappears. Right? I no longer need a job. I have a job. I need a job. I have a job. And then what starts to happen? Well, how did I pick my job? Well, I just picked what I needed to because I was desperate. There's no selection of the job. And then what happens is this job isn't great. So then what happens is like the emotional negativity starts to build up. My boss is not the best. The hours suck. The commute is too long. Negativity piles up, piles up, piles up until I am desperate. I can't stand this anymore. And once again, what is it that motivates us? Desperation. So then what do? I quit. Once again, desperation. And now that I quit, what happens? I burn through whatever savings I have. I need a job. Desperation increases. So as long as you are living a life where desperation is driving you, you will accept the bare minimum. It is about getting by today. And if your emotional strategy, if your life strategy is getting by today, you are going to get bodied right, left, and center. You will never build a life that is worth living if your goal is getting by. If your motivation is the avoidance of desperation, you will never build a happy life. Because your goal is not joy. Your goal is not success. It is, I want to get rid of this. And this, by the way, is the way that our whole medical profession has trained us to be. We have a society that focuses on fixing problems, not building things. We need to fix the homelessness problem. We need to fix, oh, you have pain? Let me give you ibuprofen. That'll take the pain away temporarily. Now you're desperate, take this pill. When the pill wears off, take another pill. When the pill wears off, take another pill. Take these 6 pills every single day. Don't build health, right? You'll never find a gym in a doctor's office. You'll never find a meditation room in a doctor's office. Right? And the most shocking example of this, like I talk about this a lot because it just really seared in my mind. I was on vascular surgery rotation. And the patient was coming in for the 3rd amputation. And the attending surgeon that I work with comes in. He's like, here we are again. This guy has literally removed pieces of this patient's feet. And he's like, this is going to keep happening while you keep smoking, right? You got to stop smoking. And she's like, yeah, doc, I know. I'm so sorry. Lops off a piece of her foot. Gives her a pamphlet. Here's how smoking is dangerous for you. Literally, dude, I was like, my mind was blown. I was like, is that the extent of this conversation? Hey, this is going to keep happening until you stop smoking. let's activate the saw and remove the foot. I was like, what the fuck? I was a third-year medical student at the time. Couldn't say a damn thing. Burned in my mind. And you can even argue, fairly so, by the way, I'm not blaming the surgeon because it's not the surgeon's job. Right? The surgeon's job is to lop things off. It's not their job to do smoking cessation counseling. But they put an order for it, and a nurse shows up while you're in the hospital and gives you some resources, does a decent job. But this is what happens in our system, is we fix problems. We don't create health. We just fix what is broken. And if in your life you are constantly fixing what is broken, you'll never break out of the cycle. Because you're not banking anything. So the cycle of desperation continues. Your primary motivation is desperation. I need a job. Let me find something. So how do we break out of this cycle? We break out of the cycle by literally breaking out of the cycle. Okay, so we're going to show you all what I mean. So, okay, I need a job. So I get a job. I can't stand this. Here's what we need to do. Find better job. When the desperation is at a low, you should keep looking for a job. Okay? I can't stand this anymore. I quit. When the desperation is at a high, I'm going to work with a therapist or coach to stay happy and in the job while I find a better job. This is how we break out of cycles, right? We literally find alternatives. But the problem is that this is hard. Why is it hard? Well, first of all, the economy sucks, right? So the deck is stacked against you. Let's remember that people who wind up in the cycle are not here because they're stupid. They're here because things are genuinely hard. If a bunch of people find themselves with a problem, right? Like if we look at like malaria affects a bunch of people in sub-Saharan Africa. Does it mean that they're dumb? No. Does it mean that they're weak? No. It means that there's a lot of mosquitoes with malaria. If a lot of people are experiencing this in our society today, it means that there's a societal problem. The first of the societal problems is that we are training people to be emotionally responsive, mercurial. We get motivated by our emotions, and this starts very early. Right? If you don't study, you're going to fail. Starts very early, where we try to incentivize people from fear and desperation. If you don't do this, you're going to get bullied. Or we bully you because you're not wearing the right clothes. So now you're motivated to dress based on the avoidance of negative emotion. This is how we live our lives, through the avoidance of negative emotion. And people who are very manipulative love this because they realize if I can create negative emotion in you, I can control your behavior. We see this a lot with the men that I work with, or I see this a lot with the men that I work with, where we guilt trip men for providing. It's a man's job to provide. Happens with women too. With cognitive load and groceries. Oh my God, don't get me started. Right, so we do this a lot. And so the challenge, though, is that when we talk about finding a better job, it's not that easy. Because first of all, the economy sucks. It's getting better, at least here in the US. But there's a second problem, which is that what is it that motivates me to get a job? This is fueled by desperation. And why don't we find a better job? Because when we find a job, we're already exhausted. I've applied to 300 jobs. I'm tired. Now the desperation goes away. I can't motivate myself to find a better job. Let's be honest. It's not that easy. Right? So then this cycle continues. I quit. And then what happens is I feel desperate. So even this is a problem. Because now what's happening is our desperation creates the sense that I need a job. And since I have a desperation, I find the first thing that'll come. I'm not selective. And if I'm not selective for my job, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to stand it. This desperation here and here inevitably creates a situation that you cannot stand. This is how you break out of the cycle. First of all, recognize that what propagates the cycle needs to change. If the driving force behind the cycle changes, the cycle will end. Right? So when there's a blood feud, which we don't have much anymore, right? But I guess take your favorite streamers that beef regularly. Right? So we still have something like blood feuds. The streamers that beef regularly. What's driving the cycle of blood feuds? It's vengeance. Right? There's no forgiveness. There's no compassion. There's no admitting what I did wrong. Both sides did something wrong, but what do they focus on? They focus on what the other side did wrong. They never own up to their mistakes. I've been in beef with people before. Generally speaking, it goes a long way to say, hey, buddy, I screwed up in these ways. I'm sorry. And then something cool happens, right? When you apologize to someone, if you're lucky, they apologize back. Yeah, I know, man. I wasn't the best either. And it's like, what the fuck did we just do here? You did this wrong. You did this wrong. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like, what the? It's that easy. But some of y'all will say, but it's not that easy because I apologize and they say, yeah, screw you. And they don't accept responsibility. Fair enough. Those people exist too. And then what you do is distance yourself. Even when you apologize to someone who does not apologize back, you've taken some energy out of that cycle because you're not aggravating them. And then they'll get less aggressive. And over time, what you want to do is just don't feed the cycle. Let this plant wither and die. But don't give it fertilizer. And in the cycle of the job, and so then over time you want to let it die. And then what you're going to do is find other relationships where people are apologetic when they do something wrong. They accept their mistakes. And then your energy is going to go over there. You will literally spend less time thinking about this person. This person may try to aggravate you, right? Because they're trying to put energy into the cycle, but now your energy is somewhere else. You just leave them behind. They can have their life. You're going to have yours. This is how you escape toxicity, through forgiveness and distance. Still not as easy as I'm describing. I recognize that. Right? This is the sketch of the strategy that works. Going back to the job thing, we have to escape this energy of desperation. See, even if I need a job, if I'm able to be patient and wait for the right job, can I manage that desperation a little bit better? When this job sucks, can I build my resilience a little bit? Can I try to improve the job a little bit? Can I seek some degree of help? Can I get some kind of support? We have to change whatever fuels the cycle. And then y'all may say, okay, so like we can reduce the desperation. This is where we're working with a therapist or coach or someone like that, right? We have career coaching where they're pretty good at this kind of stuff, right? Helping you understand where your motivation comes from. Sometimes it's more efficient to work with someone, right? I don't need to ever work with a plumber. I can do everything by myself, but it's just easier to use a plumber sometimes because it'll get done within 24 hours. And if I try to do it myself, who knows how long it'll take if you DIY it. And we're a society that has still underappreciated the value of working with someone else who specializes in human behavior. Right? So you'll see this a lot. For example, like, I gave a talk at Indeed a couple years ago, and they have like a on-staff coach. And Google has a whole coaching program, I think. Right? So they have like these internal coaching programs because they figured out like, holy crap, like this actually helps. When I went through my executive coaching certification, like half the people in the room were like HR professionals. So people have figured out this stuff helps. But the main thing to understand is if you're stuck in this cycle, it's usually driven by desperation, and you need to break out of that desperation. Reduce the desperation as much as possible. Now, a lot of people may get confused by that because they're saying, if I reduce the desperation, then I won't act. You won't act in the same way. So once you remove the desperation, it makes space for another kind of motivation. So this is where once you have a job, what do you like about it? What do you dislike about it? Can you start to be a little bit more proactive and take on projects that may be more engaging? To be more involved at your work, paradoxically, to work harder. So this is something that a lot of people miss, is that like when you're desperate and you take a job and you're like, ugh, your mental lack of engagement is what makes it untenable. So if you look at studies on health of a relationship, especially within the first 6 months, what you find is that someone's attitude towards the relationship heavily influences the health of the relationship. The attitude that someone has, if someone thinks, oh, this is a crappy relationship, I settled for this person, the relationship is going to be unhealthy. Faith in the relationship literally determines the quality of the relationship. It's not the other way around. This is what a lot of people get confused. They think, oh yeah, I have faith in the relationship because it's good. It's actually scientifically the reverse. I have faith in the relationship that makes it good. I have faith in a job that makes it better. I believe in this that makes it better. And we know this. This is placebo. I believe this medicine works. It makes it work. Fucking weird. Right? So notice the cycle of desperation. Reduce your desperation as much as possible. Create space for another kind of motivation to arise. Experiment a little bit and don't get complacent. Do you guys understand that desperation and complacency are part of a cycle? They're the same thing. They're two sides of the same coin. Once the desperation goes away, what am I left with? Am I left with joy, drive, motivation? No, I'm left with complacency. And when the complacency goes away, I'm left with desperation. This is not just a problem of desperation. This is a problem of complacency. So pay attention to this cycle. Work on the desperation. Make space and actually put forth more effort. Don't let your effort be tied to your emotional desperation. Separate these two variables. The more you do that, the better things will become. Questions? So Rockwell is asking, do you think coaching is a hidden gem in a world where people don't appreciate such ones that work with human behavior? So people who do work with coaches may have an advantage in the society. I think that's true. Absolutely. Right. So the coaching outcomes research is not great as a field, but I think that there's a reason why you see a lot of these companies investing in coaching, because they have internal metrics which are not published. But even at like, so I did a little bit of work at like Harvard Business School, and they have like an internal coaching staff at fucking Harvard Business School. Like, it's crazy. So I think that there is an advantage, but we have to be a little bit careful because we don't have large-scale studies showing exactly what the impact of coaching is. So we have like our own internal data that we presented at American Psychiatric Association about our core coaching program and specifically around technology addiction. But a lot of this stuff, we don't really have good science. Right? We have the start of good science, but it's nowhere near as robust as what we have in the medical field. Okay, so should I quit my job if I am too kind a person? After I work harder, I get new tasks while other people are slacking since I do it. never mind stupid question. I don't think so. So this is a really common problem where here I am advocating that y'all work harder. And what a lot of people will say is that I work at a job where there are slackers and I work hard and this work doesn't get recognized. I've certainly worked in places like that before. And this is where there's kind of like a dual approach to this. So on the one hand, if you work extra hard consistently over time, and I'm talking about 6 months, a year, 2 years, because oftentimes what happens is our ego gets in the way. So now that I've been on both sides of the table, right? So for example, like when you're a medical student and you're rotating somewhere, you think that the residents and interns are like, oh, they don't appreciate my hard work. And like this other person got honors and I only got a high pass. This is unfair. So then being an intern or a resident, you begin to realize that, oh, like one medical student is not really aware of what the other medical student is doing. So they think that they're working hard, but they're actually slacking off based on my view. So one of the biggest challenges is that this idea that I'm working harder than my colleagues gets really tricky with ego. Because the ego will see how hard you work, but it won't see how hard other people work. A really good example of this is you look at any relationship and you ask the person, which one of you like works harder to maintain the relationship? Which one of you apologizes more? Which one of you apologizes first on average? Which one of you does more of the chores? Most relationships, everyone will say, I do more, my partner does less. This is ego. So there's a big bias that I see a lot where someone will be like, they'll complain and they'll be like, but I did all this stuff and this person got a better grade. That's not fair. It's like, you don't actually know what the other person did, right? And you may not be quite as great as you think you are. So there's ego that you have to be careful about when you think I work harder than everyone else. Doesn't mean that you don't. I'm just saying that's something you need to consider before you judge someone. Second thing is when you work hard, there are two ways to work hard. So one is if you're working hard and consistently, then you need to assess whether the people that are around you appreciate that effort in some way. And hopefully they appreciate it. There are certain skills about highlighting that appreciation, making sure people recognize the work that you're putting in. There's also a very common problem that we see a lot, which is, we have a career coaching program where, this is a really common problem. Hard work doesn't necessarily correlate with value. Just because you're working hard doesn't mean that it is useful to people. This is a big cognitive bias that people have. If the harder I work, the more valuable it should be. That's not always the case. So we worked with Ethan Evans, who is like a senior VP at Amazon, ran a team of like 800 people, launched Amazon Prime Video. And Ethan was like, the hard work should be in the direction of what your direct report wants. Having a pet project that they don't care about that you work really hard on isn't necessarily great. And the third thing about working hard is that I tend to work hard in ways that benefit me. So this is a pet project. So in 2015, when I was a second-year resident, I started asking people about video game addiction. And I started to work on video game addiction. No one really cared. I applied for a chief resident position, didn't get it. Best thing that ever happened to me. Right? People didn't appreciate the work that I do, but I didn't care because this is something that I am building for its own benefit. I wrote a book in 2018 on video game addiction, a whole book. It's never seen the light of day because it's a piece of shit. Work that I did that was extra, has no external value except I learn. Except I gain a competence, which has a ton of value. So it's okay to work hard. I'm a big fan of working hard. I think most people should probably be working harder. I think they should also be working smarter. The two aren't mutually exclusive. People say work smarter, not harder. I don't think it's work smarter and harder. So I think when it comes to working hard, like it can be good, but it needs to be done in the right way. So the one thing to avoid is if someone asks you to work extra hard in an area that you're not interested in, that doesn't benefit you in any way, and they don't appreciate the work that you do, I think occasionally it's okay. Right? If someone asks you for a favor, I think you can do someone a solid, help out a little bit, that's fine. And the way that I think about that, people ask me for help all the time, I'll do it. It doesn't help me, but it's fine. I'm going to make the world a better place. I don't have to get compensated for every minute of work I do. But at the same time, if they're asking a lot and then they're like, oh yeah, like we need you to do these 2 jobs. And over time that doesn't change or they don't acknowledge that, then that's a problem. So I don't think it's about kindness. I think it's about really thinking about, okay, are you working hard? Is that being recognized? And are you growing in some way because of it? Because it can have an additional value. Okay, let's do one more. Great questions. Why should gifted kids have all the fun? You've heard of the gifted kid child to burned out adult pipeline. Now get ready for the below average child to the already given up adult pipeline. So, here on the channel, we tend to talk a lot about gifted kids. But what we don't talk about is ungifted kids. We don't talk about people who are below average. And I've worked with a lot of people who are below average, especially in terms of IQ. Right? So one of the cool things about being a psychiatrist is you work with people who have things like diagnoses of developmental delay. You work with people who have diagnoses of like intellectual disability. You work with people who have diagnoses of schizophrenia, which can lead to cognitive problems over time, like a cognitive decline over time. You work with people like I've had patients. This is super cool. So I'm so grateful. I trained at Mass General in McLean. And the cool thing is like people with weird conditions from all over the world fly across the world to be treated at these institutions. So I've even worked with people with things like Williams syndrome. Fascinating condition. So Williams syndrome is a chromosomal abnormality that results in a couple of interesting features. So there's some amount of intellectual disability. Their brains are different in a way to where they have no fear of like strangers. So they're incredibly friendly with everyone. They're the nicest people on the planet. They have no conception that like you're going to hurt them in some way. So we all have like this circuit in our brain that causes us to like pull back a little bit. They don't have that. The other really fascinating thing about Williams syndrome is somehow this constellation of things also results in some people with Williams syndrome with perfect pitch. So they're musical savants. You can play, like, without any training, you can play a particular key and they can, like, tell you what it is. It's weird. Brain is cool. So if you're someone who's below average IQ, has developmental delay, oftentimes what happens is you do poorly early in life, and then you have this destiny that is laid out for you, right? Because the smart kids do well. And if you do well in school, then you go to a good college. And if you go to a good college, you get a good job. And if you get a good job, you make a lot of money. If you make a lot of money, you are more attractive on the dating market. You find the right person, and then you have babies, and you go on vacations, and then you surf, and then you buy this car, and then all of this life starts with grades. So, as you start to struggle at the beginning, you are told implicitly and explicitly that you will suck at life. People will literally give you Fs. People will tell you you will go nowhere. People will tell you this is what you need to do to be successful. And then this creates the idea in your mind that you are doomed to failure. Unfortunately, there's something called the nocebo effect. And the nocebo effect is the opposite of the placebo effect. So the placebo effect is if I believe that this medicine will help me and I take the pill, I will get more help. Belief creates outcomes. The nocebo effect is also the same principle. Belief creates outcomes. But if I believe I am doomed to failure, I will actually fail. It increases the likelihood of failure when you control all other variables. And I see this a lot in the clients and patients that I work with, like especially people who are not necessarily intellectual disability, but I've worked with people with below average IQ for sure. Right? And they approach a job interview or a promotion opportunity thinking like, oh, I'm going to not do well. I'm going to fail at this. And this creates a greater chance of failure. So there are a couple of things you need to understand if you're someone who's below average intelligence about your success and trajectory. The first thing to understand is that IQ to a certain degree correlates with external success and median income, but is not nearly as cut and dry as people think. So the first thing is that if you look at the people who make the top 1% of earners in the world, they are actually not as intelligent as like the top 10%. Okay, this is really interesting. So IQ correlates with income on the whole, but the most successful people are actually not the smartest. It's not that they're not necessarily the smartest. It is literally high IQ tops out at a certain point, and then if you really want to become a top 1% earner, it's not IQ that gets you from 10% to 1%. Now, if you look at what results in success in your job, success in life, it's so much more than IQ. So your EQ matters a lot too. How kind you are, how reliable you are, how much people like you. See, human beings are community organisms. And there are a lot of things that correlate, or there are a lot of things about just being likable and caring about other people and putting your effort in the right direction that is incredibly rewarding. So I remember when I was a third or fourth year medical student, we had a student that rotated with us who was very accomplished. When I was a third or fourth year resident, we had a medical student. So what happens is I did one of these. We have these things called away rotations. So if you want to go to a very competitive program, usually like a top 5 program, what a lot of people will do is you will do an audition rotation. So as a medical student, I did a 1-month audition rotation at Massachusetts General Hospital. So if you look at the top programs in the country, you show up there for a month, you have your application on paper, but then you actually work there for a month and you let them get to know you. And in my case, that worked out. So I landed a spot there. Sometimes, though, what happens is you have these candidates that show up that are so stacked. Their resume is stacked. Excellent test scores, tons of publications, prior experience, good grades. They look like God's gift to earth. And then when the time came around to talk about this person, we were like, hey, what do y'all think about this person? A lot of us had trouble articulating because there's nothing wrong with them. They were very intelligent. They knew a lot of stuff. And so we were having difficulty, none of us were like this person. We couldn't fault them, but none of us were enthusiastic. And that's where Brilliant, one of my attendings, just fucking brilliant psychiatrist, I won't say their name, but brilliant psychiatrist. She's like, I would not want to teach that person for 4 years. She's annoying. This is what one of my attendings said. I would not want to teach this person for 4 years. So she said, I wouldn't want to be on call. I wouldn't want to supervise this person on call. I don't care how smart she is. Right? So it blew my mind just how clear they were with their language, what they understood. This person is annoying. And we're here talking about a meritocracy. Is it okay to not select someone because they're annoying? I think absolutely. Right? Annoying matters a lot in the world. And like, I love the way that she said that, because I was thinking to myself, like, I don't enjoy teaching her. I don't enjoy it. And when we're really thinking about selecting a group of people who you are going to be in the trenches with, working 80 hours a week on call for 24 hours, and the shit is hitting the fan, the emergency room is full of people, there's a guy who's high on meth who has just been put into restraints, there's another person who's psychotic, who do you want to be in the trenches with? It's not necessarily the person who has the best answers. It's the person who is the easiest to work with. It's the person that you can rely on, not the smartest person. One of the most important lessons I learned in residency: be a good person to work with. Right? The big irony is, who knows? I may not be. Right? You'd have to ask the people at HG. So if you're not the smartest person, understand that there are many ways that you can advance pretty far. And I've seen even medical students who are, in my opinion, probably average or even below average IQ. And they can actually do it. It's hard, right? So their ability to assimilate and analyze information is suboptimal. But the good news is that a lot of being a doctor is not just about knowing the right answer. It's about not being an asshole. And also, I know so many doctors who are so smart, but are so arrogant that they do not listen to the patient. They make judgments based on their brilliance. And I am sure that I've been guilty of this too. Here I am criticizing you. I'm sure I have. I'm sure I've had a day where I was thinking egotistically, where I was annoyed by the patient, where I was having a tough day. And the reason that I know this is because I have made that mistake. That's part of what medical training is. It's a lesson in humility. So now what happens is when a patient comes in to say, hey, I think this is wrong with me, I say, okay, cool. Thank you for giving me the answer. It's like, holy shit, this person is living this day in and day out. And if they tell you that this is wrong, you should take it seriously. So if you're someone who's gotten lots of Fs, you're not doomed to failure. You're not destined to nothingness. There are a couple of things that you need to understand. The first thing, life is not a race. And when I work with people who are below average IQ, they tend to move slower. But what ultimately determines where they end up is how long they move, not how fast they move. It took me 5.5 years to graduate from college. It's taken some of the people that I work with 6, but they do graduate. Medical school is not about getting straight A's in your first year. It's about having the core competencies of being a doctor when you graduate. If it takes you 6 years to graduate from college instead of 4 or even 3, you are still qualified to graduate. You meet that minimum threshold. So this is the first thing. There's no harm in going slow. There may be some harm, but there may be some harm, but I think it's not nearly as important as reaching the finish line. Reaching the finish line is the most important thing. So if you need to take time, you take time. I'm a late bloomer. I started med school at 28. I finished residency at 32. I had friends who finished residency at 26. I had friends who were finishing residency when I was still applying to medical school and getting rejected. Life isn't a race. You have to operate on your own timeline. If you try to operate on someone else's timeline, it's silly. Just think about it in any other dimension. Someone else's flight leaves at 5 in the morning. Oh my God, I need to get there by 4. What time does your flight leave? Noon. Silly. Don't play based on someone else's timeline. Ultimately, your value in the world is not how fast you did something, but how well you do something. If it takes you time, it takes you time. It took me time. Second thing, focus on the things that may not be IQ related that absolutely matter. Dependency, kindness, reliability, altruism. Human beings are community creatures. The world needs good generals and good soldiers. I personally do not think there's any shame in being a good soldier. I've been a good soldier in my life. I'm happy to continue to be a good soldier. And arguably, I'm a good soldier today. I have a boss who's a CEO who tells me to do certain things, and then I do those things. I have some leadership in this organization, but one of the most important things that we ever did for HG is me stepping down as CEO. This is bigger than Dr. K. So there's no shame to me. I don't feel ashamed by having a boss. I don't need to be the leader. And the cool thing is that your F's when you're growing up don't determine your success later. This is the other really important thing that's important about development. So if you get F's in the 3rd grade, you may just be developing slower. This is why we have a diagnosis of developmental delay. It's not developmental stunting. It's delay. So you will get there in the end. And this is the real challenge of being someone who's below average, is that you don't realize that all of these things are not destiny for you. They're not determinant of your future. But the problem is then we start believing that if I get F's in the 3rd grade, I will get F's for the rest of my life. If it takes me 5 years to graduate from high school instead of 4, it means I'm an idiot. It becomes deterministic, and then you start believing that. And the real problem is once you believe it, then it becomes destiny. It isn't the F's that make it destiny. There's an intermediary step. F leads to a lack of hope. Lack of hope leads to destiny. Very important to understand. How do I know this? Because I've worked with these people. Because the data says so. Because the data shows that if you intervene in someone's life, you can alter their trajectory. Right? I recently saw a case report of 2 people on the autism spectrum with very early intervention at 20 months, and showed a remission of autism, which I'm somewhat skeptical of. But we absolutely know that with autism spectrum, we can alter the course of the development of autism through early intervention. We have a lot of programs in psychiatry like early intervention psychosis, where we know if someone is psychotic, the earlier you intervene, the better this person does. You can alter the trajectory of life. And what really seals the coffin for these people is their belief that the trajectory cannot be altered, that once you are in this camp, you will be in this camp forever. Not true. So what would I recommend to this person? First of all, take it slow. You can get an F year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Doesn't mean that you'll get an F for the rest of your life. In my particular case, it was I got F's in year 1 and year 2. I got C's, B's in year 3, year 4 of college. And I got B's and A's year 5. Then I went to med school, went back to B for year 1 and 2. B's or C's. And then I got to years 3 and 4 and I got A's. And then I went to residency and I got A's. So past performance is not a predictor of future return. This is what people say about the stock market. And the whole point about being human is that we can alter the trajectory of our lives. The thing that fundamentally makes us human is that we don't have to listen to ourselves. I don't know that a tree can ever become a dancer. I don't know that a lion can ever become vegan. We can enforce veganism on them, but a human being who has a digestive tract that is designed to eat meat, has teeth that are designed to eat meat, can stop eating meat. A human being that wants to hurt another human being can restrain that hurt. A human being, what makes a human being is that we can fight against our nature, that we are not actually predestined. That's what makes us human. We can alter the course of our life. So understand this. Take it slow, number 1. Number 2, your future is not determined. Number 3, get help. Number 4, even if your IQ is not ideal, work on your EQ, work on being a good person, work on being reliable. It will let you rise very, very highly. There may be some partners out there who are sapiosexuals and attracted to intelligence, but most of the people that I know will take reliability, trustworthiness, and kindness over intelligence every day of the week. Yeah, it's like super cool to date someone who's a genius, but half of them are arrogant pricks. You can ask my wife. So kindness, compassion, altruism, reliability, empathy. These can help you succeed in your relationship. They can help you succeed in your career. So all is not lost. We have time for 1 or 2 questions before we wrap up for the day. Okay, so what do I do if I don't have natural empathy or alexithymia? The same thing that anyone does if they don't have natural anything else. You practice it. I didn't have natural empathy. I was naturally very alexithymic. Okay, this is how I was. And then I went through training and I became more empathic. Right? Some of us are not naturally graceful. I wasn't naturally a chef, but I'm decent at cooking now. So this is the other cool thing about being human. The stats at level 1 are not deterministic for what we are at level 20. The whole point of being human is we get to level up. Right? I know it's such a simple answer. We have tons of resources on alexithymia and empathy and things like that, so I'll refer you to those. There's a lot of good stuff on emotions. We've done lectures on emotions. We have a couple of memberships lectures on emotions. We've got a trauma guide that digs a lot into emotions. So check those resources out. We may have resource packs specifically on emotions. I'm not sure. I'll look into diaspora blues. I like that term. I'm not too familiar with it, but okay, this is a good question. How do you avoid trying too hard before it leads to burnout and not trying at all? Try to answer this one quickly, but it's a long one. See, one of the biggest problems that we run into is that we try hard, we try extra hard, and then we burn out. Because we're told, oh my God, you should try harder, you should work harder, right? By people like myself. So how do you avoid this cycle of trying extra hard, burning out, recovering, trying extra hard? So this happens because the trying hard overwhelms some of your internal signals. See, I'll give you all a great example. Or maybe a terrible example. I'll give you all an example. So there's this thing that I call the gamer diet. And the gamer diet is when you're playing games for 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. And you suppress your internal hunger signals. And when you suppress your internal hunger signals and you finally take a break from gaming, you're famished. And then you order a gigantic pizza and you consume a pizza. And then you go into a food coma. And then you get out of it a couple hours later, you put on some anime, you watch it for 3 hours, and then when you've recovered from your food coma, it's back to the game. So if we look at what propagates unhealthy cycles in our life, it is numbness to our internal signals. Because you say work really hard. You say work extra hard. What I'm saying is, why is there a really or an extra in there? Why can't it just be work hard? Well, because the reason you have to work really hard is because your body is telling you this is enough. Your body is telling you it's time to stop. Your body is telling you we need rest. And you override those signals. This is why you work really hard. Because your body is telling you enough. And then you ignore those signals and then you burn out. So many years ago, I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. And Mount Kilimanjaro is pretty cool. So what you do is you wake up at midnight and you start the last day hiking at midnight. Why? So that you can see dawn from the top of the mountain at 6 a.m. So I started hiking at midnight. Got to the top around 7:30 because I was having trouble. Hung out there for 10 or 15 minutes. You can't really hang out at the top of the mountain. It's too cold. And then I started on my way down. And then I was so excited, so thrilled. And people told us, yeah, you have to hike kind of like halfway down the mountain and then you'll spend the day there. You'll get back to the halfway point at noon. You spend the day there and then you hike back the rest of the way. And I'm like, how much hiking do we do the rest of the way? They're like, oh, it's about 6 hours, 8 hours, because going down is way easier. I was like, screw that. Let's just keep going. Like, why stop at noon? Like, I can walk downhill for another 6 or 8 hours. So, stupid me started hiking at midnight, took a 2-hour break at noon, and started down the mountain at 2 p.m. After 8 hours, I was a mess. First thing that I did was pull a muscle in my ass. Then I was limping. Did I stop? No. Next thing that I did was pull a muscle in my contralateral knee. Actually, probably tore a tendon, which is still an injury I have to this day. Did I stop then? No. Kept going. Next thing that I did is pull a muscle in the other ass. Hiked for, what is that? 7.5 hours with another 4 and then another 8 or 9. Hiked like 20 hours in one day. Fucking dumb. And my body paid the price. When you ignore the signals that your body or your brain or your mind send you, you will burn out. You will get injured. So how do we avoid the cycle of working really hard and burning out? We pay attention to what our signals are telling us about slowing down. The second thing that's really important, why don't we pay attention to those signals? Because something else is driving us. That's what we need to understand. What is driving you to ignore the signals? So in the case of working really hard and burning out, I'll give you all one really good example, right? So I work with people, they're burnt out, they're out of work for 3 months, now they have to catch up. Now I'm behind. It is the sense of behind that causes me to work twice as hard, ignore when I should slow down. See, after you've been out of work for a while, you can't go back to 150%. You should start at 50%, then 70%, then 90%. Work your way up. Go slower, not faster. Catching up involves going slower. So back when I was at MGH, I worked with patients from the concussion clinic. So these are people who have concussions. They're already 6 months behind. People with a head injury and a coma, they missed a year of school. When they go back to school, we don't tell them, hey, buddy, you missed a year of school. You need to take twice as many classes. It's the opposite. You're going to take 2 classes the first semester instead of 5. If you do okay there, you're going to take 3 classes the next semester. If you're okay there, you can take 2 classes in the summer, catch up a little bit. Then you can take a full course load the next year. You'll still be a little bit behind. Then you take a full course load the semester after that. This is the way you catch up in life, not by working harder. Not by making up for lost time. I don't know how to say this to y'all. Once time is gone, it's gone. You can't ever get it back. Don't try to make it up. Done, finished, behind you. Your attempts to reclaim time from the past will cause you to screw your present, ruin your future. This is what happens when we burn out and we fall behind. Take a lesson from evidence-based concussion treatment. Go slow. The time's gone. GG. But what difference does it make? It took you 5.5 years or 6 years to finish college instead of 4. You're a little bit behind, but then what? You finish college, you're going to work for 40 years either way. Oh, you're going to just work for 38? You can make up for it later. This is all an illusion of the mind. Second reason that we work really hard because we burn out. not just catching up. We want to impress people. Now, here's the problem with impressing people. If they are not impressed, what do? We work even harder. We're shooting for being impressed, other people being impressed with us. Now what we're doing is letting our well-being rely on the sensory availability of someone else. What if the reason they're not impressed is because they're going through a divorce? So they don't have the emotional bandwidth to say, good job, kid. There are so many variables that result in someone being impressed or not impressed. And we're relying on this. We're coveting this. We're craving this. We're flagellating ourselves in order to accomplish this thing to impress someone. Third reason we burn ourselves out and work really hard, because we need to prove something to ourselves. I don't have faith in myself. If I'm at the top of my class, then I will be good. Then I will be content. We tie our own ego, our own sense of well-being to some kind of external thing. This is a match made in hell. Because on the one hand, you can work the hardest you can possibly work and still not end up at the top of your class because maybe someone worked a little bit harder. Maybe someone cheated a little bit more. Maybe someone is a little bit smarter than you. Maybe someone has a background in the subject. Maybe just because of random chance, you spent out of 100 things that you were studying, you focused on 90, they focused on a different 90. The 90 that they focused on showed up more on the test. GG. Now you're going to let your work ethic, your self-esteem be the result, be dependent on randomness? GG. People will oftentimes flagellate themselves, work really hard. I see this in banking. I see this in medicine. It's adaptive. It allows people to succeed. But it's toxic. We've talked about toxic fuel before. So if you want to get out of this cycle of working really hard and then burning out, what you need to pay attention to is, first of all, pay attention to the signals telling you to slow down. And even if you notice the signals telling you to slow down, and I would say 75% of the people that I've worked with notice the signals. They just don't care. Something else matters to them more. And as long as that thing matters to you more, you are going to cannibalize yourself. You have to change what matters to you. And I've seen this as well with patients in banking who are in their 50s, who do way too much cocaine. They've been doing cocaine for 30 years because they're in banking, and that's what people in banking do. Work hard, play hard. Problem is now you're in your 50s. Your myocardial tissue cannot handle the levels of cocaine that you used to use 20 years ago, so you have a heart attack. And then you wind up in the hospital, where a cardiologist is taking care of you. And a cardiologist realizes, oh shit, this person tested positive for cocaine. Let's get psychiatry involved. And then they call my ass. And then you go and you work with this person. And then what do you see? You see someone who ignores their signals. And then you ask them why, and it's because they value something else. And then I have to do the work of trying to get them to recalibrate their value system. Right? And it's fun work. I love it. And I can't do it for them. They have to ultimately decide. So burnout is most often driven by you. Technically, it's an intersection between you and the workplace. That's what the research shows, but you have a component. So that's the one that we're going to work on. When I go and I work with a company, we address the company side stuff. Okay? So the more you understand yourself, the more you recognize your signals, and the more you look at why you are ignoring those signals, this is when you will truly be better. All right, y'all. That's all the time we have for today. I know we didn't cover quite as many. Huge thank you to our team for putting together the posts, whether it was TechTeller or Merck or who did it, I'm not sure. I know we didn't get to everything, but there's a lot of good stuff in here. Maybe we'll get to it next time. Thank you all very much for coming today. It's fun to be back from vacation. We also really appreciate, we talked about the board stuff at the beginning. I'm sure it'll come up again. I just want to reiterate once again that I think this is how things are supposed to happen, right? Got reprimanded by the medical board. That's the job of the medical board. They had an investigation. We cooperated. Thankfully, their reprimand does not come with a fine, a probation, no restrictions on my license. More importantly, no restrictions or, changes to the content that we make or the work that I do online. So that's great. So practically, this doesn't change what I do day in and day out. I don't think y'all will see many changes here because we don't need to change anything. They didn't say we needed to change anything. Grateful to everyone who's provided us with feedback. Grateful to our scientific advisory board. Grateful to all the people internally at HG who do develop our processes and procedures of onboarding to make sure that things are safe and boundaried and whatever. And we will continue to improve because the work that we're doing here, we believe is important. And thankfully, we're allowed to continue to do this work in an unrestricted way. So I think the board process was super fair. I think that's why we have institutions like medical boards. I think they're doing their job. I think we're going to do our job. And we are going to do the best that we can to try to tackle this mental health crisis in whatever small way we can do it. And we're going to do it for y'all because y'all are worth it. And so thank you all very much for your support over the last 4 or 5 years. Crazy. This has been going on for 5 years now, right? We'll be doing it for a couple more years at a minimum, I hope. But we never know what tomorrow brings. So thank you all very much. It's an absolute privilege to be able to do this work. It's a privilege to be able to call this work. It's not always fun, but it is an absolute honor, and I'm grateful to y'all. And we'll see y'all, I don't know what's next. When are we back? Okay, so we have a members Q&A on Monday, and then we have a deep dive into autism spectrum, I believe, scheduled for next Friday. So we're going to do a deep dive into autism next week. So we hope to see y'all there. Thank you.